Hello everyone. In this video I'd like to demonstrate how to create a simple channel strip in the QLC Plus program to control a channel fader, pan, and mute setup in the X32 mixer using MIDI. The MIDI protocol, as exposed by Behringer, doesn't give you the full features of all the mixers. You essentially are only able to do the channel mute, the channel main fader, and the channel pan for each of the channels on there. So your 32 input channels, your 16 mix buses, your FX buses, matrix DCAs, main left, right, out kind of stuff. You're able to do those. But that's pretty much it. You can't control the head amps. You can't control, say, like the mono center channel send for a channel or anything like that. You basically get mute, main, left, right, send, and pan. So just a quick demo here to show you. I have the QLC Plus program running here with a simple channel strip defined. I've put that in a frame so I can easily just kind of drag the whole thing around when I'm not in operating mode, and it'll make it easy to copy and paste that entire group of widgets over to another thing to duplicate to other channels. So here I just have a simple one for channel 1 running in operate mode, and here I'll show you. If you take a look, I click on the mute button. If you look down over here on the X32 edit program, it's reflecting the fact that the channel is now muted. Same thing with the channel fader. There's really no way to change what the digits look like up there. It's either going to be the actual DMX value for the slider or like a 0 to 100% type deal. So you got what you got with that. The same thing with the pan. 128 will be center. We can swing it left and right. And if you watch over here on the X32 edit program, again, that is all moving around as expected. We also have some bi-directional control set up, so if things are changing on the mixer, just like this, we can watch it change in QLC Plus. The only caveat being I do not have synchronization of the mute status from the mixer back to QLC Plus. It only goes one way, from QLC Plus over to the mixer, and there's a reason for that, and we'll get into that here in just a second. Go ahead and show you what all needs to be done on the mixer to get this set up, right? I'm using my, in this case, the X Live card that I've installed. It's a replacement for the X USB card that gives you some recording capabilities to SD cards built into the unit, but this should work just fine for X USB as well. So in my setup here for MIDI control, I have it using card MIDI to leverage the X Live card USB output over MIDI. If you were using the physical MIDI ports, you would use the MIDI in-out instead. What I've done here, in the MIDI receive, I said receive everything except the OSC over MIDI sysx, which we're not using. So that will allow us to take all the messages coming from QLC and process them in the mixer over MIDI. As far as MIDI transmit, what the mixer is sending back out as feedback to QLC Plus, we are not doing program changes. Now, for the sake of this demonstration, it really doesn't matter with the channel strips because the program change messages just aren't used. But we do have the mixer sending back feedback data for the fader position and the channel pan position. The reason I've left the channel mute off is I can show you here. If I turn it back on, go back to QLC Plus, if I click it, the status just kind of flip-flops on and off. There's no, what's essentially happening is that QLC Plus sends turn the mute on, and then the mixer comes back and says, oh, I have feedback for this. Let me send that message back to QLC Plus, and essentially, since it's a button, it's a toggle, it will just turn it off. So if you have trouble with your mute channel sticking, double check to make sure this channel mute CC is off as well. So I should also mention that I'm using version 4 of the X32 firmware for this. I know as the evolution of their firmware has progressed, there is a bunch of different changes behind the scenes to what they're doing with the MIDI stuff and what all is available for use as MIDI messages, MIDI emulations, all that kind of good stuff. This is just the straight up just raw MIDI stuff that's coming through. No Mackie type edits or control type stuff. So this button stays disabled through all of this. So I'll give you a quick demonstration here of what the channel setup looks like in QLC Plus. Right, I'm just assuming here that everybody knows how to set up widgets for these things. So here we have for the channel pan, it's just a simple knob. And then we're using an input profile for Behringer X32, and then the input channel for channel 1 pan. That's the only other setup. We don't have to do anything with level, playback, submaster, none of that stuff, because all we're doing is using this as a simple send and receive feedback channel. There's no DMX things going on underneath the covers. And the same thing with the channel fader as well, right? We said it's the same kind of setup, no level, playback, submaster setup, any of that stuff. We're using the X32 input, and we're also telling it that this is for the channel 1 fader. The mute button, kind of the same thing. It's just buttons in this case have to have functions. So we just assign it to the channel 1 mute function, which is nothing more than just a simple scene that just toggles something on and off. It really has no bearing on a change to a DMX fixture or anything like that. It's essentially just a dead path. So we can provide a function into the button here, which is a required thing. We tell it to toggle it on and off, because that's what we want, right? We hit the button, we want to turn the mute on, we hit the button again, we want to turn the mute off, that kind of stuff. And then just a nice little channel label down here, so I don't have to put channel 1 on each of all of these things, since it really doesn't make sense. And like I said, I put all these in a frame here so I can just move it around and do the simple stuff like that. Now to go ahead and take a look at what we've got configured for the input and output universes, this is somewhat of an important thing here. So we have the MIDI connection here to our XLive card in the mixer. It shows up as a MIDI line in QLC Plus. So we do that. The one thing you're definitely going to want to make sure is you have MIDI channels 1 through 16 on both the inputs and the outputs. The X32 mixer sends its data over multiple MIDI channels, so you'll want to make sure you're able to capture all of those. And then X32 will do a great job of sending those back out on the appropriate channels as necessary. The mode, since we are using it strictly as a feedback type system, is really not important here. You can leave those as default, set them to whatever you want. It's not going to matter. So that is pretty much it on how to go about setting up a simple channel strip in QLC Plus to control an X32 mixer channel.